Okay, hi and Assalamualaikum. This is part 2 for the normative theory, right? So this is a continuation from our previous video where I have discussed a couple of important things. First of all, from that discussion, you must already understand what we mean by normative theory. All right, so normative theory, in short, is a theory that talk about the ideals, okay, or the best practices of media and communication. So we've discussed a couple of examples of theories. Okay, mostly we have focused on libertarianism. Okay, so this is a normative theory, okay, or principles, okay, that has been upheld by especially the Americans. Okay, not just in media and communication, but also in their way of life. Okay, but like I said, all right, normative theory is the best practices, okay, adopted by a particular culture, particular country, based on their own, what we call it, relative experiences. Okay. So we've already discussed, I think we stopped at talking about the professionalization of journalism. Okay, what is the relationship between professionalism of journalism and libertarianism? Is because the freedom that is given to the media, okay, is supposedly allows journalists, okay, and newsmakers to be more free in covering events, issues, controversies, allowing the media to be the fourth estate, all right, and journalists to be the mark hackers. Okay, so I hope you're already familiar with these terms. Okay, so today we're going to continue with social responsibility theory. All right, we've already talked about how libertarianism offer a perspective, okay, that offers total freedom, okay, to the media practitioners, to the media companies, okay. But as the Americans experience it, okay, they realize, well, total freedom is not entirely good, because through their own experience, okay, if you've probably heard of the cases such as yellow journalism, okay, or jazz journalism, what are these? Okay, these are examples of how total freedom can be misused. Okay, in the early 1900s, okay, during the peak of the newspaper, all right, when newspapers were very popular, it became very commercial, in which the newspapers were competing with one another. As a result, okay, they were not focusing on hard, responsible news. They were focusing on giving out news that was going to attract more readers and create more profit. So instead of covering political news, for example, they were covering more gossips, what we call it, tabloid-like news. Okay, they were offering the readers comics instead of hard news. Okay, so when this happens, then they realize, well, too much freedom is not good. So there needs to be a middle ground. There needs to be some kind of a control. But still, they do not want any authoritative control. They don't want the government or the institutions to control them. So they adopt another theory that we call as social responsibility theory. Okay? So this is a normative theory that substitutes media industry and public responsibility for total media freedom on the one hand, and for the external control on the other. That means, okay, the media companies, okay, the media practitioners, they accept there needs to be some kind of control. Okay, so the idea of social responsibility theory, okay, is much related to the Chicago school, the cultural school, all right, we will discuss later, all right, when we discuss about critical cultural theory. Okay, so what is this Chicago school? All right, so the Chicago school is a research, okay, it's actually based on sociology, all right. So social researchers at the University of Chicago in the 1940s, who envisioned modern cities as great communities made up of hundreds of interrelated small groups. Okay, remember when we discussed about mass society, okay, the early years of the revolution, okay, the industrial revolution in the US, where the focus was development, the focus was wealth, economic, all right. So all of this focus, okay, and stress for economic development has put some kind of what we call as stress to the people. Okay, and in Chicago, for example, where there were many immigrants, they were not able to assimilate into the society. So I'm talking about 1940s America, right? And as a result, the immigrants, okay, the minorities were mostly involved in crimes, and they were mostly poor. So of course, if you take the typical rule, okay, you just arrest these people, okay, find them problematic, okay, and get rid of them. Okay, so like what is happening now, okay? But the Chicago school, they find, okay, because they use the cultural approach, they say you cannot just do that to people. You must understand why they are having all these problems. Okay, so they did the study, they did the research, and they find out the main problems are because there are no effort to assimilate these groups of people into the society. So somebody, okay, institutions, governments must take the responsibility to help them. Okay, among others, they suggested there needs to be the government, for example, needs to be build more community centers where these people can participate, okay, and also work together with the locals. So this brought in a new perspective to the American psyche, all right, the way the Americans understand life, okay. So they say too much freedom, okay, too much dependence on development, economic development is not good enough if there is no balance with social responsibility. Right, so the Chicago School demands for social responsibility from the government, from the institutions, from the elites, from those people who can do something about it. All right, those people who can make change, who are the decision makers. All right, because according to the Chicago School, okay, instead of looking at cities, as factories, we must see as communities. You know how communities are, right? We are linked to one another, we care about one another, right? So they say that people, groups, okay, must be seen as pluralistic groups. You know what's the word plural, right? We are different. Okay, we are different, but we can accept one another. All right, we are different, but we can work together based on what is similar among us. Okay, pluralistic group. Okay, in this class we are quite pluralist. Okay, we have the Arabs, we have the Africans, we have the Malays, we have the Chinese. All right, so that is considered plural, but we are able to be together because we focus on what keeps us together. For example, our religion, our beliefs, okay, our desire to get good education. Okay, so in a great community, the various segments define specific unifying characteristics. And in the case of the American society in the 1940s, okay, the immigrants, the minorities, the white, the majorities, the elites, okay, they try to find a unifying characteristics that is, okay, everybody wants a better life. Everybody wants better economy. So we have to work together under one great community. Okay, it cannot be like total libertarianism where everybody do whatever they want. So if this is allowed, then the rich, okay, will continue just to oppress, okay, to discriminate as long as they can maximize profit. And as a result, okay, the poor, for example, will think, hey, they too have the right to do whatever they want. Okay, and it may be being involved in crimes. So all of this relate to the idea of social responsibility. Too much freedom is not good. All right, there needs to be some kind of responsibility upheld by the decision makers, especially. Okay. Okay, let me go back first. Okay, social responsibility theory in terms of the media especially, okay, how is it different from libertarianism? So a media industry that practices libertarianism do not want to have any kind of rules, okay? But under social responsibility theory, they want freedom, okay, but they assume responsibility because they do not want to be controlled by another. What it means is that in American media system now at the moment, they no longer practice libertarianism. Instead, they adopt social responsibility in the sense that they do not want the government or the institutions or the president to create rules or laws to bind or control them. Okay, but in order to maintain what we call it good, in order to make sure they don't get into trouble because of being too free, they could adopt social responsibility in the sense that the media companies themselves would create the rules and regulations to be followed. And these give rise to the development of ethics, okay, best practices, what we call it, guidelines. Okay, what it means here that is that because the media companies, because the media industry do not want the government to control them, they say, okay, we will be more responsible. How can we be more accountable? Okay, we will create our own ethical rules. We will create some guides, okay? We will create some, what we call it, definitions that will make sure that we are responsible media practitioners. Can you follow? All right, social responsibility theory. So I always give the Janet Jackson example. Okay, what happened with Janet Jackson? So it was during Super Bowl. Okay, couple of years back. So she wanted to perform. Okay, if you know, Super Bowl is the biggest media event in the US. Okay, because everyone is watching it. Okay, in the US. So celebrities are sometimes called to perform. Okay, during the breaks. Okay, and remember, okay, millions of people are watching. So Janet Jackson. Okay, you know Janet Jackson? I assume you know, all right? So Janet Jackson was supposed to do some kind of a trick or a special performance where Justin Timberlake, okay, her guest in the performance, okay, was supposed to rip off her jacket. So what happened when he ripped off the jacket? Okay, he ripped off everything and she was exposed on national television during a national event where children, old people, okay, everybody is watching. So she was exposed, all right? Okay, so you don't need to be imagining things, okay? So just know that something bad happened during that event. Now, okay, there is no rules or laws in the US to say that Janet Jackson cannot expose herself on national TV. There's no law, all right? But what happened was, okay, the public were not happy that event happened. They were not happy that their children, that their young children, okay, are asking why they are seeing what they saw on television. So there was a lot of retaliations. Okay, people were not happy, making complaints. And when this happened, the government had to take action. This is what most media companies do not want. All right, they don't want, because the government, although there's no law or regulations, they will take action against media companies if there is a lot of complaints from the public. Okay, so as a result, okay, the media company had to apologize, okay, had to pay a certain amount of money to the complainers, and this was not good, okay, for the business. And because of this, while the media industries in the US especially, right, do not have laws that regulate them, okay, because they believe in libertarianism, okay, now they still adopt some kind of responsibility because they know too much freedom does not necessarily guarantee security, right? So what are the strengths? The strength is, okay, it takes the middle path. It's not too free like libertarianism. So it values media responsibility. It values audience also must be responsible. And in the meantime, they limit government's intrusion. Okay, how do they limit government's intrusion? Because they say, no, you don't need to take care of us. We're matured. We have our own guides. Okay, because we are socially responsible. But it does allow for reasonable government control. It values diversity and pluralism, okay? And then it aids the powerless, okay? Who are the powerless? Probably the audiences or the minority groups, okay? Because if we are talking about libertarianism only, freedom, there is no need to focus on minority groups or the powerless, okay? That all the TV channels would only focus on, for example, white privileges, okay, will focus on the life of the rich, okay? But because of the social responsibility theory, when people complain, when the blacks complain or the Latinos complain or the Muslims complain, well, they're not represented in the media, okay, then it becomes the responsibility of the media companies and the media industries to take that into consideration consideration. So that is why now you can see more representation in American media, right? It is still consistent with US legal tradition because there is still freedom. It's just that the media industry itself has to be responsible. Unfortunately, it is overly optimistic about media's willingness to meet responsibility. All right, how can you make sure that this media company will choose to be responsible, okay, when they are also confronted with the needs to make lots of money? Okay, the same thing with individual. Are we really individual audiences? Are we really individual media users? Okay, with the rise of fake news, with the rise of these viral, insensitive comments on social media or in the media, we can find that, you know, people are not most of the time responsible. It underestimates power of profit motivation and competition. Okay, this is what we mean just now. Okay, if we are too optimistic, okay, will the media choose to be responsible, okay, when they are demanded to make lots of profit, and it still legitimizes status quo? Okay, what do they mean that this responsibility still legitimize status quo? It's because they don't really question. Okay, they don't really want to go against the government or the status quo. The main reason why they try to be responsible is because they want to make people happy, and that people don't revolt, or that people do not risk or do not try to go against the status quo. Okay, so what it means here, yes, you still have stories, representation of Blacks, Muslims, Latinos in American media, but they are still the minority. Okay, even in the media. So these are some of the principles of social responsibility theory. Remember, okay, these social responsibility theories suggests that media companies create their own ethical guidelines, create their own procedures. Okay, they create and then they follow. Okay, so how do they create it? So these are some of the examples, okay, that they must follow. They must be professional. They must regulate within the law and institutions. Okay, they must avoid whatever might lead to crime, violence. Okay, and they must be pluralist. Remember, it is based on the idea of pluralist forum. All right, a pluralist, a great community. Okay. So pluralist here again, like I mentioned, is an understanding or an acceptance of diversity. Okay, and they have to be accountable to society as well as employers and the market. Okay, so this is actually a quite big responsibility for the media industries because there are so many stakeholders that they need to satisfy. And then the society and the public have the right to expect high standards of performance, and intervention can be justified to secure the public good. That means, for example, like the case of the Janet Jackson, okay, this public feels that the media was not doing what it should, okay, and not setting a high standard. That's why they intervened. They started to complain. They complained to the government, and the government had to take action. Okay, so all of this I'm not going to go into detail because I think it's very clear and direct. But what is the problem with professionalization? Okay, there is definitely a limit to professionalization because you're basically dependent, okay, on. Okay, so I previously talked about the importance of professionalization and how libertarianism and freedom allows for the professionalization of the journalists, say, and the creation of the macaques. But of course, these are all ideals because that's what normative theory is. Okay, there's definitely going to be limitations because we're dealing especially with humans. Okay, so what are the different limitations? Okay, professionals in every field, including journalism, have been reluctant to identify and censor colleagues who violate professional standards. Okay, some of you may have experience being in the journalism field, all right, where you go for news. Not all your colleagues or even yourself is going to be ethical in their work. So are you going to report on them? Most people don't. Okay, because when you have too much freedom, okay, there is no black and white rules. Although you might have some ethical guidelines, those guidelines are not legally binding. Okay, And professional standards can be overly abstract and ambiguous, okay, because there's no rules and regulations. Remember, even under social responsibility theory, there is no hard law, okay? It's the standards and ethical guidelines that are constructed by the media organization themselves. So it can be abstract and ambiguous, okay? And it's not legally binding, okay? So in contrast with medicine and law and hard science, media professionalization doesn't include standards for professional training and licensing. Okay, remember, okay, in media and communication, it's not a professional discipline. It means that anyone can become a journalist. Okay, it's not like being a doctor. For example, when you're sick, okay, you don't just go to your neighbors who says that I can give you medicine, right? You want to go to a real doctor. You want to go to a clinic where the wall is full of the doctor's certificate to certify that he is a professional, okay, that he's an approved practitioner, okay? With journalists, it could be anyone who can write, okay? And in contrast with other professions, media practitioners tend to have less independent control over their work, all right? Yes, they are not that independent because when you write a news, then you have your editor, and your editor have his editor. And then there's the stakeholders, and then there's the shareholders, and then there's the government. Okay, there are many gatekeepers when you talk about producing news. Okay. And in the media industries, violation of professional standards rarely has immediate, directly observable consequences. This is another issue, right? Because when we talk about being in medicine, for example, okay, if there is some violation of professional standards or someone made a mistake, okay, the repercussion, the result will be immediate. Somebody might die, somebody might lose his hand or lose his limbs, okay? But in media, you write a bad piece of news or you write a fake news, for example, the effect is not going to be immediate, but the effect can be very detrimental, all right? It can affect peace and harmony, it can create revolution, it can create what we call it mass protests, but the effect will not be immediate, okay? So the consequences would take probably a long time, okay? So how can you control, right? So this is the these are the problems, okay? And under libertarianism also, you have another theory, the dual responsibility model. Just now we talk about social responsibility. So what's the difference, okay? So these social responsibilities, dual responsibility, they are still part of libertarianism. They are still want media freedom, but they believe in responsible and accountable practices, okay? But when we talk about social responsibility, it's quite what we call it very broad, okay, generic, because it just say that the media industry has to be responsible over all of their stakeholders. Okay, and this can be quite abstract. So they come up with another model or another theory, which is the dual responsibility theory. So under this theory, all right, it says that the media, okay, is actually a revision of the social responsibility theory because it delineates the role of fiscal as well as social responsibility in news decision making. In the sense, it makes it more clear. It says, okay, we're not just going to be responsible for everyone, we must be responsible in two ways, okay? Fiscal and social. That means to the public, to the audience, and also to their stakeholders, to their investors. That means trying to find a balance between becoming a watchdog as well as a profit-making organization. Okay, so this is part of it is the stakeholder theory, the idea that companies should operate in the best interest of all those who depend on them. They are stakeholders. Okay, it's not just the audiences. And most of these companies, right, they need to survive. Okay, so they need to make that profit. They need to make sure that the fiscal, okay, the monetary responsibility is also upheld. Okay. So this is a traditional model of social responsibility theory. Oh, please don't look at this one. It's this one that I want to show you. Okay, the dual responsibility model. Okay, that means the media is responsible to the audience. Okay, but it is also responsible to the shareholders, which are those investors, to the owners. So it has to be clear, Okay, it has to be realistic. Okay, because they are adopting a capitalistic and living in a capitalistic culture society. Okay, so it's not really just about making the audiences happy and trying to give the audiences the most objective news. It's also about trying to satisfy those who invest in them, that allow them to be in operation. Okay, so I think you can see it's very simple. Okay, the differences between social responsibility and dual responsibility. All right, okay, so we've already discussed, all right, all these normative theories of the media, okay, and all of these normative theories are Western concepts, okay, here, okay, Western concepts that derived from the idea of libertarianism, okay. By now you should understand libertarianism is a very broad, okay, we call it, it's a grand theory. It's a grand normative theory. It is not just limited to media and communication. It's actually a principle, okay, that is adopted as a way of life by the Westerners especially. Okay, so under libertarianism, you have total freedom. Okay, and for media practices especially, okay, they realize that total media freedom is not really good all the time. So they've come up with other theories, okay, like social responsibility theory, dual responsibility theory, okay, and they also come up with ideas like muckrakers, the fourth estate. All of these are ideas under libertarianism, okay, but okay, like I said, most of these theories are American. Okay, because they were developed by the Americans based on their experience. Okay, and other countries, other societies, it's not always viable for us to adopt the same normative theory. All right. So here are examples of different types of theories. Okay. Western concept we've discussed in length, very detailed previously. Okay. So you have developmental concept. This concept is a normative theory describing systems in which government and media work in concert to ensure that the media aid the planned beneficial development of a given nation. This is a unique concept that's different, okay? Not entirely different, okay, but it is it's not quite the opposite of the Western concept, but it adopts a different goal, okay? Because unlike libertarianism that do not want any state control, developmental concept acknowledges government and institutional control. Okay, so I give you an example. Most developing countries, okay, like Malaysia, like Indonesia, like most of our countries, okay, Muslim nations, we cannot adopt libertarianism, okay, because it's not part of our culture and it's not going to be good for us. Because we are a different nation. We're not like the Americans, for example. They are already developed. Okay, they have a strong economy. Okay, what about countries like Malaysia that just got their independence in 1957? Okay, a country that is composed of different ethnic groups. Okay, so we cannot be totally free. We need some kind of control. So we adopt what is called as development concept in the sense that the media is free. Okay, the media is not controlled authoritarianly, like the authoritarian theory, okay, but the media works in concert together with the government to build the nation. All right. So, for example, in Malaysia, there are many, especially after the independence, okay, there were many rules established by the government. For example, there must be more local content, and then there must be more, for example, the use of bahasa in the news, okay, in prime time programs. Okay, so these were made as laws or rules enforced by the government on the media. Okay, so why were they enforced? Because it was important that these things be applied to build a more united Malaysia. Okay, for those people who grew up, okay, probably not the undergraduates. Okay, for the postgraduate students, I'm very sure growing up you're familiar with many what we call as patriotic songs. Okay, the Malay, the Chinese, the Indians, they all know songs like Setia or what else? Dirgahayu, something like that lah. All these Malay songs. Okay, you have Chinese friends, you have Indian friends, but they can all understand the songs. They know the song Senyum, they know the song Legenda. Why? Because they all have heard of that song. Because it is being played, okay, religiously by the mainstream media. Okay, if it was not enforced by the government, the media will not play these kind of songs because it's not going to make money. But the government say you play it because we want to make sure that that Malaysians, that the society, okay, can be unified through music. Okay, but we don't see that anymore because globalization has taken over the media system. All right. Or there is another example in Malaysia. You have the rules of wajib tayang. I always give this. Okay, wajib. It's not sunat. It's not makruh. Okay, it's wajib. That means the government has a rule that says, okay, all local films must be played. Okay, it is a rule, it is wajib. Okay, that cinemas must play these films for 2 weeks. Okay, even if no one comes to watch that film. Okay, why? Because if the government does not make that rule, a local film cannot compete with a Hollywood blockbuster. When we go to the cinemas, okay, but the cinemas are quite dying right now. Okay. And if you go to the cinemas, and the cinemas now are big cineplexes, right? They have, for example, 20 theaters, 20 rooms. They will be playing all Hollywood films. That is why the government must force. If you have 20 theaters, one of it must play the local film that nobody watches. Even if nobody watches, okay, it's okay, the genes, okay, wants to come and watch. Why? This is to protect the local industry because we have a different conditions. We are competing with these big, gigantic conglomerates. We are competing with the American media. The American media is not really competing. They're competing among each other. So they do not need the same kind of government intervention. So far understood, right? Development concept. Or there's another type of concept, okay, the revolutionary concept. That media, okay, is a normative theory ascribing a system in which media are used in service of revolution. Okay, revolution means what? Means abrupt change, a forced change. And we have seen this in many countries, okay, and we've seen it in the experience of the Arab Spring, okay, or the Islamic Revolution. If you see, okay, if you've been following, okay, the political changes around the world, many has been attributed to the role of the media. Okay, whenever there is a new media, especially, there will be some kind of revolution, because access to media, information distributed through the media, okay, can give ideas and mobilize. Okay, they can mobilize people to force for change. Okay. And then there's the authoritarian concept. Okay, so although when we talk about authoritarian, the first thing that comes to us is North Korea or probably some communist country. Okay, but the idea of authoritarian concept is actually a 1600s colonial media. Okay, the British adopted the early authoritarian concept. So who gave this idea of this authoritarian concept? The American scholars. Okay, because they wanted to be free, so they adopt libertarianism. So they say before they were able to become libertarians, okay, they were under the controls of the British, who were authoritarian. Okay, so authoritarian concept is a normative theory advocating the complete domination of media by a government for the purpose of forcing those media to serve the government. All right, and this is very different from developmental. Developmental, the media and the government work together, although probably most of the time the government will have the upper hand. Okay, but here the government controls, definitely control. The government dictates what can and cannot be shared, for example. Okay, so yes, of course, probably would assume that nowadays countries like North Korea, where there is no media freedom. Okay, some would say in the 90s, probably most of the Arab media, okay, they were quite authoritarian, because their main role is to serve the government, not serve the people. Okay, serve the government, what the government wants to be shared to the people. Okay, Then there's another idea, which is the communism concept. Okay, it is quite like authoritarian because there's no media freedom, total opposite of libertarianism. Okay, but the main differences between authoritarian media and communist media, is that the communist media does not necessarily serve the government, but they serve the communist ideology. All right, the role of the media is to make sure that all the audiences understand and adopts the communist ideology. Of course, we don't really see communist countries anymore, right? China has opened up, okay? Although it's not libertarian, it's not really communist, okay? In the 90s, in the 80s, probably you have countries like Cuba, okay, some part of Russia, and then USSR, right? And then the China, okay, they adopt this concept. Okay, for example, every morning they have to read the Red Book. Okay, this is what they distribute via the radio. So the Red Book in China is their what we call it, religious, their scripture lah, not religious. Okay, but it's to build up the communist ideology. Okay. But all of these theories, these normative theories, they are just ideals, okay? And it depends, and it's relative to the experience of a particular nation or a particular group of people. So it has been criticized, okay, these theories, because it looks as if it's quite rigid. Okay, you try to categorize, force, push, okay, certain culture, certain society in a particular theory. Okay, Western concept, authoritarian concept. It's not always the extremes. Okay, so some people say we can't really, push or imagine, okay, that media to be in a particular straitjacket. Okay, so because the media would change also according to time. For example, now during the pandemic, okay, the media is not that free because the media cannot just freely write about things because they need to be careful. So they cannot be totally libertarian during times of crisis. So it is said that media, most of the time, is based on a transitional media approach. That means it is less category-based, more flexible, okay, to evaluating media systems than traditional normative theory. That means you can go here, go there. It depends on the situation. But you will see that basically this transitional media approach is part of the postmodern idea. Okay, today we are living in a postmodern idea. That's another concept altogether where there's no rules actually, right? Because we cannot bind people or countries into a particular category. Okay, so initially the classic four, okay, normative theories are authoritarian. This is the original one, the ones practiced by the colonials. Okay, and when America got their freedom, they do not want to be under authoritarian rule, so they created the idea of libertarian, yeah, the idea of Robert Milton. Okay, so libertarian and those who were against libertarianism, okay, during the Cold War started to come up with the idea of communism. Okay, but as the society became more modern, okay, times of colonial rules have long gone. People talk about social responsibility and developmental. Okay, it's classic four because they don't really refer to developmental. It is added. Okay, so but if you can see, all of these theories are based on the American and Western experience. Okay, they were in the authoritarian rule, and then they didn't like it, they adopt libertarian, then they realized it's not good, they adopt social responsibility, and then they talked about the enemy, which is the communist. But they don't talk about the experiences of the others, like us, for example. Okay, we don't want any of this, so we adopt developmental. But of course, like I've mentioned just now, there are other normative theories, and some say at this particular time and age, we need to be more flexible, okay, and we adopt the transitional because it depends. Okay, in times of crisis, the media has to be authoritarian. That means the government must control the media. Okay, but in good times, it can be quite libertarian. Okay, all right. So I hope, okay, you are clear, okay, about our discussion on normative theory. Okay, like I said, when we study theory, don't be nervous. Okay, you just need to be able. Okay, the best way to understand theory is to relate. okay, to the culture, to the experiences of current times, or also to understand the basic background of how the theory was established. Okay, so I think that is it for normative theory. So if you have any questions, we can discuss in class. Okay.